Okay, Alexander, we're live. We are live.
Mm-hmm.
How are you doing, Alexander?
I'm doing very well. I'm living through very interesting times, as the famous Chinese expression is, but we're all living through these very interesting times. And of course, we're all waiting to see what's going to happen today. I mean, some extraordinary pictures coming from China of, armored columns and things on a scale that, I have to say, the very fact that it's been done so publicly, though, does make one wonder whether it's all a bit of theatre, actually. I say that because one would have assumed that if there's going to be a real Chinese build-up and a real Chinese advance on Taiwan, they would be rather more careful to keep it less visible. But there it is. It's clearly a show of force, and it's a huge show of force. And whatever one may think about this whole affair, it's undoubtedly going to antagonize the Chinese, and it's going to consolidate China's relationship with Russia, which is really what I think Donald Trump was trying to prevent. If you remember, that was the whole idea, try to split this alliance. We seem to be intent on making it stronger.
Well, we'll get into whether this is a bunch of theater in reference to an article by Politico. And we'll talk about
Politico.
What they claim is going on. What they claim is going on with negotiations and diplomacy taking place behind the scenes. Let's first say a quick hello to everybody that is joining us on YouTube, on Rumble, on Odyssey, on Telegram, and the Duran.locals.com. How is the Duran.locals.com chat doing today? And to all our moderators, I think I saw the one and only Spartan Warrior Queen is with us. How are you doing, Spartan Warrior Queen? Good to see you here. Good to have you with us. Who else is moderating? I think that's everybody that's moderating. So me and Spartan Warrior Queen are moderating today. And welcome to the Duran community, Radio Serbona 753. Is that a real radio station that is now a member of the Duran community? Welcome. Hello, Danielle. So happy that Alex is in Belgrade. I am happy to be in Belgrade as well. I love this city, love the people, love the food, Alexander. Love the weather because it is not as hot as it is in Athens, as you know how Athens gets in August. Okay, so we have about an hour and a half, and this time I'm going to have to put a hard stop this because Alexander will be attending. You will be a member of Gonzalo Lira's channel for the live stream that he'll be putting together at around, what time is it, London time, that live stream is taking place?
It's at 1400 London time. Okay. And can I just say it'll be myself, Gonzalo, Brian Bertolich, who some of you may know as the New Atlas, and Eve Smith from Naked Capitalism, and lots of other things. So it'll be quite an interesting thing, and we'll be obviously talking about the China situation, but no doubt other things too.
Great panel, and Alexander will be finishing this live stream, and then he'll be running to the same room because it's all virtual, and you'll be jumping on another live stream after this one. So let's get started.
Absolutely.
Whatever questions we can't get to, everybody, we will do a dedicated video to those questions that we can't get to because of the time constraints and Alexander's next live stream after this one. So we'll go for an hour and a half. Alexander, Taiwan, Nancy Pelosi. Is she going? Is she not going? She's in Malaysia. They say she's flying out of Malaysia now. We've got this Political article which is saying that this is really all theater, and the Chinese and the Americans are actually speaking to each other, and they've kind of worked everything out, and they've even worked out various off ramps so no one loses face. This is very, very possible. I'm not saying that's what's going on. It is Politico, and Politico has been known to tell a fib or two. They still believe that Ukraine is winning the war. But Alexander, what do you make of everything that is going on? The big story is Pelosi, but we may want to touch upon what is going on in Kosovo. You did an excellent video on that yesterday. You explained things very well. We have some tension in Azerbaijan and Armenia as well that is flaring up.
Yeah.
We also have the news from the Biden White House that they took out Osama bin Laden's number 2 guy, and interesting timing there, I would say, in Afghanistan. But let's begin with Taiwan, and then we'll get to questions as well from.
Let's in fact just talk about that Politico article, because of course Politico is quite close to the administration. So I suspect this is sourced from the administration. Now, I'm going to say that I think that article is true up to a point, in that I think that if you read the Chinese media, and I was reading them yesterday and again this morning, I'm getting the increasing impression that the Chinese are not going to launch an immediate military attack on Taiwan. So I think all these, enormous troop movements that we're seeing, all this appearance of tanks, and deployments of missiles and deployments of aircraft carriers, it's intended as a show of force. It's not intended as preparatory to an attack on Taiwan or to shooting down Pelosi's plane or any one of those things. So that's what I think that's happening. I think there are those communications. I think somebody in Washington is very keen to talk to the Chinese to try and explain, that we don't really want to, see this crisis escalate. We don't want a clash. It would be an absolute disaster for us both if there was a clash. And I think that's what's happening. But you talk about off-ramps and both sides saving face. And here, I think, is the rub of the issue. Because assuming Pelosi does go to Taiwan, and I think nearly everybody assumes that she is, it's difficult to see how the Chinese can see that as anything else other than a major provocation to themselves. So they may swallow that provocation for the moment. They may get all kinds of assurances from the US, including public assurances, that this isn't going to happen again. Pelosi was acting, on her own initiative. But the fact is, the Chinese have already made it clear that they don't accept that they fully believe that Pelosi acted in concert with the Biden administration. And the Chinese have already said that they don't trust Biden personally or what the administration is saying. And by the way, I've now been reading in the Chinese media and indeed in parts of the US media, on Zero Edge. I did an analysis, if you remember, I went through on my channel. I passed through the Chinese readout in great detail of the conversation between Xi Jinping and Biden. And we also discussed it at length in a video that we did here on the Duran. And on both occasions, I said that Xi Jinping was giving a very, very clear warnings to Biden, was setting out red lines, that it was a tense and difficult call. And it was a call that basically showed the trust and respect between these two leaders. And respect is, a key word, has completely broken down. And the Chinese are basically confirming all of that now, unofficially. They're saying it was the worst conversation Xi Jinping has had with any leader since any other foreign leader since he became China's president. So, given that all this is so, how do you talk about an off-ramp? The US may give assurances, this administration may give assurances. The Chinese won't believe them. So you can get through this crisis, perhaps, without a clash. But for China, Taiwan is an existential issue. It is the brightest of red lines. They're now convinced that sooner or later, this administration is going to try to cross it. And you can be absolutely sure from this moment on that the entire energy and focus of the Chinese government will be to prepare for the move that it is going to make at some point in the near future, which will be some kind of armed invasion of Taiwan. This is now, I think, baked in the cake. It is bound to happen.
An armed invasion of Taiwan is what you're saying is going to happen.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely. Because the Chinese are convinced that the administration is now aiming to support Taiwanese independence. Just as all those negotiations that took place before the Russians launched their special operation in Ukraine, the way we now know an awful lot more, by the way, about the kind of discussions Biden and Putin had. And it seems that Putin came away absolutely convinced from these discussions that Biden was lying to him and that the United States fully intended to bring Ukraine into NATO, which the Russians had said is absolute red line. The Chinese are now convinced. They may be right, they may be wrong, but this is what they now believe, that this administration, sooner or later, intends to recognize Taiwan as an independent country. And given that that is so, given the way the Chinese feel about this, given that for China this is an existential issue, they're now going to prepare for war over Taiwan.
Yeah, so Tucker Carlson, I was watching his show last night, this morning, but it was the last night's show. And he actually made a very interesting revelation, which I didn't really think about in the past, because I've been trying to draw parallels between Ukraine and Taiwan. And there are a lot of parallels, how ramping up escalation with Russia kind of parallels the ramp up of escalation with China. And one of the points that he made, which I didn't take into consideration, is about a month, give or take, before the February 24th special military operation, you had the Munich Security Council meeting. And who did the Biden White House send to that meeting? Kamala Harris. And what was she scripted to say in her speech, which was scripted? She was scripted to say, Ukraine absolutely has the right to join NATO if it wants to.
Yeah.
We welcome it into NATO. It is Ukraine's choice. That was pretty much her statement as a representative of the Biden White House. And at that same Security Council meeting, that Munich security meeting, you also had Zelensky come out with a very interesting statement where he claimed that Ukraine was going to obtain nuclear weapons. And that was pretty much that. From what I understand, after that Munich get together of the Davos cool kids, Moscow said, "That's it. We see where this is heading. We're going to go ahead with this SMO." The point is that you're seeing the same thing happen in China, where who does the Biden White House send? Even though they claim they're not sending her, of course they're sending her. They're sending Nancy Pelosi, 82, senile. Half of the time she's drunk. She has no idea what the hell is going on. But they're going to send her, from what it looks like, they're going to send her to Taiwan to do what? Nothing really, just to stir up trouble. But it's pretty much moving in the same pattern as we saw the conflict in Ukraine move. And Tucker Carlson, being employed by Fox News, during that monologue that he was given, he even came out with a statement saying that the Biden White House wanted a war with Russia, and they got it by sending Kamala Harris to Munich to make those statements. The parallel is that Biden White House, they want a war with China by sending Nancy Pelosi to go to Taiwan, to show up there, make some scripted statements. God knows what she's going to say. God knows if she even understands what she's saying. And there you have it. So what do you make of that?
I think Tucker is extremely insightful and probably right. Can I just say, I remember that Munich Security Conference. I remember Kamala Harris's speech. And I remember all the other people who were speaking there too. And I've said this many times in many programs. That was the moment when I said to myself, you know, I had thought up to that point that something would be done and that we'd avoid a war over Ukraine. Though I was never, I thought, there was always the danger that a war might happen. But after that Munich Security Conference, I'm not going to. I was extremely concerned. I was listening to them all. I was listening to Kamala Harris. I was listening to Annalena Baerbock. I was listening to Boris Johnson. I was listening to Olaf Scholz. I was listening to Emmanuel Macron. And I said to myself, they've all taken leave of their senses. And that led, as we saw, directly to this war in Ukraine, which we now have and are losing, by the way. And it seems to me that Tucker's absolutely right. You send Nancy Pelosi now to Taiwan. You go through the same script all over again. You wheel out the old man, Biden, to call the leaders, just as he was calling Putin, and he was calling, and he calls Xi Jinping. He pretends that nothing has changed, that there's no real plan. There was no plan for Ukraine to enter NATO. There was no plan for the US to recognize Taiwanese independence. But of course, the reality was, in both cases, that the Russians in the first case and the Chinese in the second case, very quickly decided that Biden was lying to them. And that's what the Chinese are saying. That's what the Russians are saying. Remember, Putin talks about the empire of lies. Who is he referring to? So this is unfortunately very likely that what Tucker says is true. I don't know that we're going to have a clash at precisely this moment. I've been reading Chinese commentaries. I get the sense that the Chinese think that from a military point of view, they're not quite ready. Their aircraft carrier, their new big super carrier, has only just been floated and launched. It's still got to develop its air group. I think they feel that they're not just ready yet to launch this attack on Taiwan. But they're determined that Taiwan will not become independent. They made it clear that's a red line. And the administration seems to be doing everything it possibly can to provoke the Chinese into thinking that the United States will recognize Taiwanese independence, and that means a war. So it looks to me as if Tucker is probably right.
Okay, so we'll get to some questions in a bit, but real quick, Alexander, we're seeing all kinds of escalation around the world. Like I said, we have now this flare up between Azerbaijan and Armenia, which started up again. We had the weekend incident, the escalation in Kosovo, which is not going away. Things have calmed down, but this is not resolved by any means. And of course, we have now Taiwan, and then we have the conflict which continues in Ukraine, of which Biden has approved more wonder weapons to go to Ukraine and to help Zelensky in this great Kherson counteroffensive that he keeps on going on about. Why does the Biden White House want to start so many wars?
Because the neocons,
they want to start World War III. But okay, yes, the neocons. Explain the neocons. But can you also explain if there's some other hidden agenda? Is this an election ploy? Is this a neoliberal endeavor? Is this about crashing the system because the economies are crashing and the world order is crashing? In other words, everything is falling apart. We know empire is falling apart. So if we can't be the empire, well, then no one can be the empire. I mean, I'm just throwing stuff out there. What do you think's going on?
I think every point you've made is absolutely right. At one level, I mean, his approval ratings are now at catastrophically low levels in the mid-30s, which is disastrous. He's got an economy in recession entirely as a result of his own actions, by the way. Remember, when he became president, he was going to turbocharge the US economy, and it was going to achieve, blistering growth rates, which were going to surpass China's. And of course, the irony of it all is that the result of what he did triggered an inflation and a major recession in the United States. even as the Chinese, for their own completely different reasons, their growth rates have been falling. So it was all for nothing ultimately. But I mean, one way or the other, he's now got a very bad economic situation in the United States. His approval ratings are collapsing. The prospects of the Democrats in the November midterms are turning awful. Europe is in a very deep crisis. He's rowing back, or rather the West, the collective West, is rowing back on its sanctions. We've done a number of programs about this, how they've eased off on the food and fertilizer sanctions. They've just eased off on the oil sanctions. They've eased off apparently on the aviation sanctions. They're now allowing apparently spare parts, as well as letting planes fly from Cyprus via Yerevan to Moscow. They're now allowing spare parts to go to Russia as well, and the London insurance market is going to provide insurance cover for Russian aviation engines. But they've got to do all of these things, but the only reason they're doing that is because things are so bad. So what do? You're going to lose. You're heading for defeat. There's talk that Trump, the bad orange man, may be back in 2024. So you've got to find some way to hold things together. Well, you create a crisis perhaps in Taiwan, over Taiwan. The Republicans don't like China very much. Maybe that will help you. Maybe that will pull people together in some ways. Maybe that will make you look like the great war president. Not that I can imagine anybody in the United States being convinced by Joe Biden as a war president. But maybe that's what you think you can do. And, rally people around the flag and the president in the way that's happened in the past. Alternatively, not alternatively, because, you have different people. This is the other thing that's so dangerous about Washington at the moment. You have all these people pursuing completely different agendas. You're saying to yourself, globalization, the big project of globalization that we were practicing over the last 20 or 30 years, it's clearly not working. China's managed to turn it to its advantage. Russia is now forging these economic links with China. So what we've got to do is you've got to sever the economic links with China. We've got to bring the guillotine down on them now, because that's the way we are going to integrate more closely our own economic space. So we're going to give up on our larger ambitions and retrench, but we're going to make sure that the collective West, the Five Eyes, Europe, that part, which is our core empire, if you like, that remains even more tightly integrated and controlled with us than ever. So there's no doubt those people following those agendas as well. And then there's the third group, there's the neocons, the neoliberals, all of those people who, of course, from their point of view, China is the great enemy, the great challenge. The Chinese-Russian alliance, the attempt to break it up has failed. The attempt to turn the Russians, to change the Russians' mind about it, or to achieve regime change in Moscow through the sanctions war and the Ukraine war, that hasn't worked. So what do, you have to take on China head on. You do so over Taiwan, and you do so in a way that you hope is going to humiliate Xi Jinping and perhaps destabilize the political leadership in China. So you have all of these people pursuing all these different agendas, and no doubt, and quite possibly, there's a few naive idealists who really do believe in all the rhetoric that this is all about standing up to China and supporting Taiwan as well. I mean, there may very well be some people like that too. So you get all of this complicated web of people, and none of them asks the fundamental question: is this in the American people's interests now? Does it make any sense in the middle of a geopolitical crisis with Russia, in the middle of a global economic crisis, to consolidate the Chinese-Russian alliance, and at the same time to make our own economic crisis far worse by taking China head on? But
I've got
that question isn't really ever asked.
I've got an even more basic question before we
Mm.
get to the questions that people are asking. What exactly is the goal of Pelosi's trip to Taiwan? I mean, what's her reason for going? Is she signing some sort of agreement, a trade agreement? Is she looking after her investment portfolio?
Right.
Is she there as an official Biden White House representative? Is she representing Congress and she's going to sign some bilateral, I don't know, parliament to U.S. Congress? I don't know. What does Taiwan have? Does it have a parliament? What does it have there? I don't even know.
It does have a
I
parliament.
mean, okay, so is she like there to create some sort of agreement between the two congressional bodies? I mean, I'm being totally serious here, but I'm also kind of laughing about this because no one is really asking, nor has Pelosi explained, what exactly are you going there for? I mean, what is the purpose of your trip? What is your itinerary? Are you just going there to just hang out and see Taiwan? Hey, I'm here, everybody. Here I am. Pour me a drink. Let's hang out. This is making no sense to me.
It's an absolutely excellent question. And I'm going to say what I think about this, which is that I think that the original intention when this plan of sending Pelosi to Taiwan was first floated a few weeks ago is different from the situation that we have today. Now, what has been happening is that ever since the Biden administration took office, they have been whittling away the US's announced one China policy. They've been increasingly treating Taiwan as if it was an independent country. So they've been in talks with Taiwan about opening a representative office, the Taiwanese representative office in Washington, D.C. They've been canvassing, getting Taiwan into parts of the UN system. In other words, treating it as if it was an independent country. They've been talking about military supplies to Taiwan. They've been doing all kinds of things like that. It's not been, a major every one of these steps has been in itself relatively minor and incremental, but it all points in the same direction towards eventually recognizing Taiwan as an independent country. So you take one small step after another. You calculate that none of these steps in and of themselves will be enough to really provoke the Chinese into strong action. It's what the Chinese themselves call salami tactics. You just gradually take one step after another until you normalize the idea that Taiwan is going to become an independent country and that the US is going to recognize it. And I think that was partly what the intention was. So the idea was you send Pelosi, she's technically not part of the administration. She's an official, a senior official of the US government, because the House of Representatives is part of the whole governmental structure in the United States. So she's there in an official capacity, but she's not part of the administration. She visits Taiwan. She meets the president. She meets the speaker of the Taiwanese parliament. She, as you said, travels around the country. It normalizes the idea that top US officials are able to visit Taiwan. It normalizes the idea that Taiwan is almost an independent country, except, of course, that I think that they didn't fully expect Jake Sullivan and Blinken and all those people, the enormously strong Chinese reaction. Because, of course, the Chinese understand very well what's going on. They've been giving warning after warning to the administration ever since it came into office that they understand these salami tactics and they're not going to accept them. And they've said, this Pelosi thing is, it goes too far. And I think that they've now found themselves in a situation where they're almost obliged, if you like, to carry on with something that has grown beyond what they had originally anticipated. And of course, within the administration, there are the very strong hardliners who've seized on this and who, in fact, do want to take it further. But I think that was the original idea. It was to normalize the idea, to make it seem routine that the United States government was maintaining high-level contacts with Taiwan.
Yeah, you know that Sullivan and Blinken, I'll put money on it that they're sitting around in the White House and they've got this imagination working. They're sitting there, spitballing ideas, and I'm positive that Sullivan is going to Blinken saying, you know what? Yeah, we'll just send Pelosi there, and China will lose face. Xi Jinping's government will collapse. We'll have a new government in China. China will break away from Russia. India will be in chaos, and we'll control the world after that. That's how we're going to play it. Then the Moscow's gonna capitulate to Zelensky, and it's just going to be a domino effect. They've got some crazy kind of thinking like that going on in their head as well. And then when reality hits them, they're kind of like, well, oh crap, what do we do now? Well, let's just take out the number 2 from Al Qaeda, and that'll be a nice distraction. Or something like that. We need
to come on to that. Can I just quickly say
strong Biden,
because,
strong Biden. He got the job done. Aviator glasses. And, Bidenopolis. He took out Bin Laden's number 2 guy. Jack.
I know. Isn't it interesting that all these years, this gentleman, Mr. al-Zawahiri, has been floating around Afghanistan and nobody's been able to find him. And then suddenly, after the US withdrew, they suddenly did. Now, I'm not try and guess, but it does look to me a little odd that he was found and killed at precisely this moment in time. But, I agree. I think this is exactly what it is. As I said, we've got to find something. And I think you've summed up Biden, Blinken, Sullivan, all the rest. I mean, they are overgrown school children. I mean, I say that
children with dynamite. School children with dynamite.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Of course, Blinken is in his 60s, so he's a very old child. But, I mean, you have that sense about this, that this is amateurs, people coming up with these clever ideas. And my God, we've had endless numbers of them. We had the clever idea of, sanctioning the Russian central bank. Don't talk to the Federal Reserve Board. Don't talk to the Wall Street banks. Just do it. And that's going to cause everything in Moscow to come crashing down. Except, of course, it doesn't. And then sanction Russian oil. But then, of course, that hasn't worked quite as you expected either. So, you have to try and find some way to walk it back. And as you said, send Kamala Harris to the Munich Security Conference. Scripter. Send Pelosi to Taiwan. Scripter as well. Except nothing ever quite works in exactly the way that you expected. And inevitably, you get surprised and you find yourself in a complete and utter mess.
Yeah, because the people on the other side, Putin and Xi and these guys, they're not playing around.
No, of course not.
I mean, they're serious, which is why if this does go through and Pelosi does touch down in Taiwan, I'm very curious. I mean, frightened as to where we're heading to, but I have to admit, I'm very, very curious to see what China's response is going to be.
Well, I think everybody is. I think everybody is curious. As I said, we have this major show of force. But I think at the moment it is just a show of force. I think what the Chinese are doing is they're saying, look, this is a red line. You're crossing it now. We're engaging in this huge build-up. We don't want a war at this precise moment. We're going to exercise restraint, but don't count on it in future. And we're going to work really, really hard from this point on to bring Taiwan back into the Chinese motherland. That's the language that the Chinese use. And if you don't stand aside and let us do it, well, you've got to fight with us on your hands. That's going to be the Chinese policy from this moment on. I think that they're now convinced, one way or the other, that the US is lying to them over Taiwan and has been lying to them over Taiwan, and that unless China itself acts, then Taiwan is going to declare itself independent, and the US will recognize it.
All right, let's get to some questions, but real quick, one more question for you, Alexander, before we get to the questions is: who told Blinken to buzz off with regards to starting trouble in Kosovo, because we all know it was the State Department and Blinken who concocted this idea to escalate in Kosovo. What forces? Who was it? Was it the EU? Was it other people in the State Department? Was it people in the Pentagon? Who do you think told Blinken, look, we don't need this now, Blinken? This was an interesting, clever idea that you had here in order to stir up trouble for Serbia and for the region in general, but not now.
I think it was two groups of people. I think firstly it was the Germans and the French on the one hand. I think they came around and said, look, we got ourselves into a terrible mess in Europe. We can't afford another crisis in Europe over Kosovo at this time. I mean, I've just been reading things about France, getting information from people in France. The suggestion there is that the situation is about to explode in France, that things are really, really difficult in France, and that Macron is himself beginning to become extremely nervous about the situation in France. I also get the sense that things in Britain are beginning to reach close to breaking point, and of course in Germany. So I think they probably came along and said to Blinken, look, this is an interesting idea, as you said, but we just don't want it now. Probably the Greeks too, by the way. I mean, I don't know how much attention Blinken and co give to what the Greeks say, but I would have thought that even the Greeks, for what it's worth, will have come along and said, we just don't need this at this time. If you want to,
Sanchez of Spain also made some statements.
Sanchez, exactly,
saying we don't want this. Yeah,
exactly. All of these people. I mean, bear in mind, with many countries in Europe, with 5 EU countries, NATO countries, in effect siding with Serbia over the Kosovo's legal legitimacy. I mean, there's a very real risk of a public split if there was a war over Kosovo. So I think the Europeans won't have wanted it, but I think the Pentagon doesn't want it either. And of course, the Pentagon has a very major military presence in Kosovo. They have a huge base there, and they will have phoned up the White House, they'll phone the State Department, and they said, we're in a potential confrontation with China. We're in already a confrontation with Russia. We absolutely do not need a situation where we have the Serb army fighting the Kosovans close to our own base. That could put American lives at risk. We don't want to get dragged on into this thing. Now it's got to stop. This is one crisis too far. Now, I think all of them pulled back, but as you said at the start of the program, the situation is not resolved. And of course, the hardliners in the State Department, which is neocon central, by the way, they've not gone away, and they might start something fresh. And Kosovo remains a tinderbox.
All right, let's get to some questions. We'll answer as many as we can, Alexander, before you have to head off to the other live stream, which will be taking place on Gonzalo Lira's 2. Actually, it's the Gonzalo Lira 2 channel. So let's see. From Odyssey, Novus says, "Are you both transmitting from your bunkers?" No, this is a hotel room, Novus. So the internet is not as good as I was hoping it would be. But
no, it's from my house. Can I say? I mean, absolutely. I'm not hiding it. I'm not skulking in any bunkers.
We're not in bunkers yet.
Not in bunkers yet. Yes.
Let's see.
I do have a cellar, actually. I do have a cellar, so I suppose I could move there if things get really tight.
Novus says that the website that tracks the plane of Pelosi just crashed. That I did not hear. If you can confirm that, Novus, I did not hear that at all.
Okay.
Nadia says it's all an act. The leaders worldwide together against the people.
Yeah, I mean, there's an element of truth to this, but we mustn't underestimate, as I said, how strongly people in China do feel about this issue. I think this is very reckless, what is being done over Pelosi. I think this is all an act, but it's an act that's getting out of hand. It's going off script and dangerously so.
Yeah. From Rumble, Andres says the Pelosi family had $12 million in NVIDIA stock and sold $6 million last week. NVIDIA chips are made in Taiwan. Duran, is this trip to be used as a laundry case for the chips bill vote. Actually, Trump came out with a statement and kind of hinted at the same thing with regards to the reasons for this Pelosi trip. I think that could be one of
absolutely
the reasons she said, okay, Anthony, I'll go. That's fine. But I don't think it's the overarching reason, but definitely she might say, yeah, we could cash in here while I'm at it.
I agree. I don't think it's the overarching reason. But of course, what we've been talking about is why the administration has sent her to Taiwan, which is one thing, because, by the way, it is the administration. I think, it's been the legal position has been explained to me very, very clearly. If Biden didn't want her to go, he could have stopped her. He clearly facilitated, arranged. I say he, we understand, whom I'm talking about. I don't mean Biden himself, but the people around him. They facilitated and arranged this trip. But what we haven't discussed is why Pelosi herself chose to go. Because, this isn't just Pelosi, following orders. She's obviously got her own reasons for going. And, that seems to me as good a reason as any. She's got form with China. She went to Tiananmen Square during the protests, as I sort of vaguely remember. But she's undoubtedly got her own reasons for going to Taiwan. And, the one you've just said might be as good as any.
Can I make one quick comment? Alexander, tell me what you think about it. The Biden family, Hunter, Burisma, Ukraine. Pelosi, she's been to Taiwan before. She stirred up trouble there before. She has her investment portfolio, which is the best performing investment portfolio in the world. And so, she's stirring up trouble in Taiwan. Biden was one of when he was a senator back in the day, was one of the people in the Senate who really took the lead and pushed for the NATO war against Serbia. Isn't it interesting how all of these same people who pushed all of these wars and business dealings and all of these things in the past, all of a sudden, here we are with the same countries and the same hotspots and these same people pushing all those buttons again.
No, absolutely. There's aspects to all of this which we don't know. But one of the things we don't know is the extent to which private interests have got confused with public ones. And I suspect that there's a big story there, which is to a great extent still hidden from us. Well, Biden himself has had long histories of dealings with China.
Biden in China, CFC, let's not forget. All the 10% for the big guy, absolutely. And, not a coincidence. Not a coincidence at all. Budweiser, thank you for that super sticker. Geostone says, hello, Alex. Thanks for the great work. I have to ask a question in the general chat. It has 2 parts. Okay, Geostone. I'll try to look in the general chat for those 2 parts. Aaron NGO says, you bros are the best. Keep up the exceptional work. Stephen Bateman, FJB. Thank you very much for that. 12 Bravo. Welcome to the Duran community. Hank Swama, how's it going? Thank you for that. Wildfish, thank you for that super sticker. Swagata Raja says, Alexander, will Pelosi's landing in Taiwan lead to Xi Jinping's downfall in November? The Chinese give a lot of importance to face, or will they recognize the LPR and the DPR?
I don't think they're going to do either of those things at the moment, actually. I don't think they're going to recognize the LPR and the DPR because, of course, if they did, well, they're violating their own position about territorial integrity of states at precisely the moment when they want to defend it, because it's so important to them that they keep this idea that Taiwan is a part of China. So I don't think that they're going to do that. So I don't think we should expect it. And I certainly don't expect Xi Jinping to lose control. I think what's much more likely to happen is that there will be a crystallization, a hardening of the political position behind him. But my impression of the Chinese political system is that it's very, very systemic. It's very structured. I think the Chinese Politburo discusses all of these things together. I don't think we're going to see any kind of challenge to Xi Jinping. And I certainly don't think that China will want in November to give an impression of disagreement, of division within the Chinese leadership at a time when China is under challenge. So I think, on the contrary, we're going to probably see Xi Jinping's position strengthened even more, unless, of course, there is some kind of massive Chinese climb down, which I don't expect. So, but what I do think we're going to see are two things. Firstly, as I said, the Chinese preparing for what they now believe is the inevitable war over Taiwan. That's one. And the other, China becoming even closer to Russia. It's a few weeks ago, remember, when the administration was talking to the Chinese to persuade the Chinese to support US sanctions against Russia. What chance is there of that now?
Yeah. Ago says the U.S. is baiting China into a proxy war. The wise move would be for China not to invade, but to blockade Taiwan.
Yeah, well, I mean, they've got a whole range of things they're going to do. I don't think they're going to even do that at the moment. I don't think they're fully ready. That's why. But they're going to work hard to make themselves ready. From this moment on, as I said, this is going to be the major focus of Chinese energies.
Yeah. Colin Jones, thank you for that super sticker. Simon RB says, late in Oz, so before I fall asleep, keep shining the light, gents. It's essential listening these days. Hopefully I won't wake up to World War III. Can't be bothered going through basic training again in my 40s. Thank you very much, Simon, for that. And Jeffic says, what is your take on the Mail Online propaganda saying it's Ukraine soldiers clearing the butterfly mines that Russia dropped on their own territory? Yeah, of course.
Well, I think
Russia dropped it on their own territory. The Mail Online has become such trash. I mean, they were going off, Alexander, every day about how Putin is sick and General Pavel is the general replace. I mean, just complete gossip trash.
I know. Well, I mean, I think this is just a ludicrous claim. I'm not going to even spend time on it. I mean, the people at the Daily Mail need to just, I think, search their own consciences, because this is such a ludicrous idea that the Russians would spread butterfly mines to impede their own people on their own cities, on Donetsk and those sort of places, and that the Ukrainians would be clearing them. When, I mean, anybody who's following this,
how are they doing that? How are they clearing them?
How are they doing?
How is Ukraine clearing those mines at Donetsk?
Well, through thought transmission.
They're able
to I mean, exactly. I mean, it's just. I let's not waste too much time on it. It's just. I mean, it's propaganda which is becoming bordering on the ridiculous. The reason it works, the only reason it works in Britain, is because, of course, British people have so little access to information about what's actually going on in this war. They're very vague about where various places are. I mean, they don't know where the Donetsk is or who controls it or things of that kind. So you can spin and come up with these fantastic stories, and people will read them and accept them as true because they don't know otherwise. But those of us who do follow this war carefully, and there are plenty of people in Britain who do, by the way, know that this claim is nonsense.
Yeah, let me place hundreds of butterfly petal mines in Donetsk if I'm Russia, just because I just want to, because that's the way we are. We're just evil, and this is what came to mind. And then when I place those mines, let me call in Ukraine, invite them into Donetsk so they could clear those mines and make me look even more evil. This is like stuff from Austin Powers. This is really our scenarios that Dr. Evil would come up with.
Yes, exactly. You're completely right. You're completely right. I mean, it does. I mean, as I said, the people who run the Daily Mail need to reflect on their own consciences and ask themselves what kind of journalism they're conducting, because this isn't journalism. This is just, it's not even propaganda, ultimately. It's just too ridiculous to be called any of these things.
Yeah. Zionic, thank you for that super sticker. Toilet Sauce says, Global Times states that the plane carrying Pelosi will be intercepted if it tries to approach Taiwan. Note, intercepting does not necessarily equal shooting down.
I know. I agree. Anyway, we'll see.
We'll see.
And Global Times has been saying lots of pretty strong things. we'll see what the Chinese do. I mean, I think they will let this pass. Partly, I think that because I want to think this. I mean, I don't want, a military clash, but I might be wrong. This is a very, very tense situation, and we shall see. But, intercept, as you correctly say, doesn't necessarily mean shoot down. Let's see what happens.
Ben Redwood says Colonel Lawrence Wilkerson stated that war games for conventional war between the U.S. and China always end in nuclear war. The insanity of the Biden administration is terrifying.
It is absolutely terrible. It is the most dangerous administration I can ever remember. There has never been an administration as dangerous as this one.
The adults in the room is what they were telling us. The adults are back. Yeah.
Well, indeed. I mean, we went from a presidency, Donald Trump's, which never started a new war, to a presidency that is almost obsessive about starting conflicts and wars everywhere he possibly can, and picking nuclear superpowers as his adversaries.
Tyler Durden says maybe it's all a diversion and China is on it. The timing is very convenient.
That may not be untrue, but I mean, I think one way or the other, I come back to what I'm saying. The very fact of Pelosi going to Taiwan is for the Chinese a major provocation, and one which is very, very difficult for them to walk back from. In fact, I don't see how they can.
All right. Sanjeva says 2 years ago, to one of the questions from Alexander, answered that a Democrat, USA, and Greens Germany victory in 2020 would lead to geopolitical chaos. I was skeptical of the analysis, but now I see he was 100% true. Did we really say that, Sanjeva? Did Alexander? Do you remember that, Alexander?
No, I don't remember that, but I mean, it's the sort of thing we probably did, quite possibly did say. I mean, what I do remember is that we both thought that a Biden White House would be a disaster.
But not
I have to say, I didn't think it would be as bad as it's turned out.
Yeah, not this bad.
No,
he definitely outdid himself. That's for
absolutely.
sure. In a bad way. Marcos says, is Pelosi's visit a fatal diplomatic bungle that's possibly analogous to Honoria sending a wedding ring to Attila, which led to the Hunnic invasion of Rome and the collapse of an already overextended and long decayed empire? Great question.
Can I just say, what an amazingly erudite question. I mean, this really is an amazing question, comment. The late Roman Empire and Attila the Hun and all of that. Yeah, I think it is. I think it's a huge, huge blunder. And I think we've discussed, I think Alex has got this absolutely right. It's been cooked up by these overgrown children in the White House, coming up with some clever scheme to embarrass the Chinese, move forward this Taiwanese independence thing, normalize this idea. And of course, it's now blowing up in their faces and they're scrambling around saying, oh, heck, what do we do? But of course, it's got out of their control. But it's exactly that kind of blunder.
Yeah. Possum Power says, I am screwed. I'm an American living in China. God help us. Thank you for your super chat, Possum Power. No, you'll be okay. I think Possum Power.
You'll be okay. Right, yeah. I agree. I think so. Yeah. I don't think the Chinese will take. I don't think the Chinese will take any action against Westerners in China. To be honest, I mean, I just don't see this at all.
Yeah, I agree. RC says, does the West realize that China would decimate them? So now they have pivoted to Kosovo, Serbia.
It's one would like to think so. Trouble is, you see, pivoting to Kosovo, Serbia is all very well, but if you retreat in the Pacific, then of course that has implications in the Pacific too. I don't think they're going to push ahead with Kosovo for the reasons that we've discussed. Alex and I in our various programs, and on the Duran as well. I think that there's too many people in Europe and in the Pentagon who just don't want an escalation in Kosovo at this precise moment in time. So I don't think that they're going to pivot in that way. But, I think that there was an attempt to create, well, I don't think, I have no doubt that there was an attempt to stir the pot in Kosovo. But I don't think it was about China. I think the intention was to distract the Russians. The situation in Donbass is going bad. It's turning very bad. The Russians are advancing, breaking through these fortified lines opposite Donetsk city, something which nobody thought they would be able to do at this stage of the war, but they're doing it. And I think somebody said, what do we do? How do we distract the Russians? Well, we start something in Kosovo. I think this is what Sullivan and Blinken and company were up to. And I think the real adults in the room, perhaps not very clever adults, but still people who have more understanding of the dangers of this, came along and said, no, this is not the time for this.
Yeah, but I thought those wonder weapon HIMARS were turning the tide of the war.
Well, indeed, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, the Russians have just claimed that they've destroyed 6 in total. So,
yeah. Yep. Euro Gabor says, "All right, then, I'll go to hell, Mark Twain." End of quote. Repeat the line. Mark Twain. Well said, Euro Gabor.
Mark Twain was very good. Mark Twain was very good, and of course, he wrote. He represents, the cleverness and wisdom of the real United States.
Yes. Roman, thank you for that super sticker. RC says, you often hear it thrown around that America currently mirrors the end of the Roman Empire.
Go on. Go on.
No, I was just going to say, yeah. I was going to read the next question, but go ahead. Yeah.
I think there's some truth to that, but I'm going to say I think that the country that it resembles most to me, actually, if I have to say this, is 17th century Spain. You look at the period of early to mid 17th century history, you find that the Spanish were becoming increasingly aggressive and involving themselves in more and more places all the time, because they sensed that they were losing, that their power was diminishing. And they were trying to lock things in by starting wars against all sorts of places. And of course, in the end, it turned disastrously for them. They were defeated by the French at a battle called Rocroi. The Catalans revolted, and so did the Portuguese, and the Spanish monarchy crashed. And I think that's perhaps a better analogy. If you want ancient analogies, look at the Spartans. After defeating Athens, like the US won the Cold War, so it claims, they also went on a kind of rampage, even as Spartan power began to dwindle. And again, suddenly, as a result of these constant wars that they were engaging, this push against lots of states, their power suddenly imploded. The Romans, actually, if you follow their history carefully, late Roman history, they did it. They tried to run things more moderately.
Inisfad says the Western leaders are graduates of the WEF. The WEF has advised that the U.S. will no longer be a global superpower. Are we not watching this happen?
Yes, I think there's a lot of truth to that. I think that globalists and the WEF are not exactly the same people, but there is a huge amount of overlap. And of course, they get on with each other. The WEF, which is a European thing, I always say this about the WEF. It's important to understand they originated in Europe, and it's European ideas that have pushed this and that have been trying to use the US. But they joined up with the neocons in the US. They share those ideas, and well, we see the result.
Sukati says, Alexander, have you heard of the Punjab referendum to become independent from India after numerous genocides? Great work.
No, I haven't. So much going. If it's a contemporary thing, so much going on. I'll need to keep an eye on that. Presumably that's the Sikhs in the Punjab.
Commander Crossfire says, I think as the U.S. West loses their dominance, we will see a lot more conflicts break out around the world as peoples raise against artificially inserted governments, and the U.S. lashes out in anger.
Well, this is the fear. Can I just say, this is what's so frustrating to me. I just think the US really needs to be worried in that kind of way. Yes, it's not going to be the hyperpower that it briefly was in the 90s. I don't see what good that did for the American people, it being the hyperpower. But if you look at the United States, if you look at the aggregate power and wealth that the United States still has, I don't think they need to be worried. Okay, China, which has plenty of problems, is going to become powerful, Russia too, but the US could follow a completely different, much more Pacific policy, focusing on its internal developments, and it would be fine. What it is doing is not delaying its decline, it's securing its decline, it's causing its decline.
Yeah. Oz says, are there any drawbacks of populism?
Well, populism is one of these huge words, phrases that can mean lots of things to different people. If you're talking about the United States, the best people, the most insightful people at the moment in the United States are the people who I would call populists. And they are overwhelming, well, who are called populists, and they are overwhelmingly in the United States on the right.
Beer and Flies, thank you for that awesome super sticker. Elza, thank you for that super sticker. Joe Tacoma, thank you for that super chat. Senj Tico, thank you for that super chat. And Oz says, regarding the economic crisis in the West, does the quantitative easing, printing money, always cause inflation?
Yes, ultimately. We've been hearing lots about the Roman Empire. Let me say, one of the fundamental reasons for the decline and fall of the Roman Empire is that the Roman government, in order to maintain all its, to cover all its costs, started to debase the coinage. They reduced the silver content of the Roman currency, the denarius, until basically there was no silver content in the denarius. In other words, they were doing the modern equivalent of printing money, and that created a huge economic crisis. And it was one of the things that ultimately weakened the Roman economy to the point where Rome went into decline and eventually it fell. And you can see much the same thing happening in the West today. There's been this massive money printing, this money creation, I should say, rather than money printing. And what it has done, by the way, Putin gave a very, very interesting discussion about this. What it has done is that it has sucked in goods into the West and into the United States from all over the world, while simultaneously weakening the US's own productive base. In other words, it's made the US dependent, more dependent, and less productive. It is, in the end, disastrous.
Zariel says, Alexander, tomorrow evening I'll have to discuss something with you about Germany's energy crisis. I've researched something interesting till then.
That will be fascinating, Zariel. Let's definitely do that. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Zariel. RC says, with the election integrity issue in the U.S., what is going to keep the Dems from preventing an election landslide in November?
That is a hugely interesting question. I'm not going to. We have to be so careful anyway because we're, broadcasting on YouTube as much as other people. But I'm going to say this: they're going to pull every stop. Don't be under any doubts about that. Whether it'll be enough is another matter. But they're going to pull every stop in advance of those midterms.
Yeah, VUF Berlick says, where do you expect the Biden administration will try to instigate the fourth war after Ukraine, China, Taiwan, and Kosovo, Serbia?
The most likely place is somewhere in the Middle East, the Gulf. I mean, we've had rumors of the Israelis preparing some kind of airstrikes against Iran. There's talk about more things going on in Syria. There's a major crisis in Iraq at the moment. If there's going to be a war, I'm guessing it'll be that.
Commander Crossfire says, if and when China moves to liberate Taiwan Island, what are the chances Japan, South Korea may be pulled into the crisis? And would China do a special military operation like Russia or go full out?
I think that there is a real risk that Japan will become involved. I don't think South Korea would, actually. I think the South Koreans have enough to worry about closer to home with North Korea and its nuclear program and all that. But I think there's a real chance that Japan may do so. Again, I hope reason prevails and the Japanese stay out of this. After all, if the US can't deal with this problem, what chance does Japan have? Powerful country, though Japan is, with powerful armed forces, as it undoubtedly does have.
Sanjeva says, Alexander, can you teach Biden and Pelosi about the Chinese century of humiliation and how that memory prevents modern China from being meek when confronted? This is playing with dragon fire.
It's absolutely, you're completely right. I mean, I've discussed it. I've actually done a program for my channel. Where I touch on it again. I mean, the period of the century of humiliation basically starts in the 1830s, 1840s, when the colonial powers, the European colonial powers, principally the British, started to chip away at China, at that time under the rule of the Qing dynasty, the Manchus. They, as we all know, they started to export opium to China because they were worried that China was running a major trade surplus with the British Empire because the British were buying Chinese tea. So the British tried to balance that surplus by exporting opium. That led to all kinds of problems. That led to wars with China. The Chinese government at that time became increasingly enfeebled. The Western powers started to break off bits of China. Hong Kong is the best known. Macau. The Germans established a settlement in Tianjin. There was the international settlement in Shanghai. Eventually, the Western powers effectively ran much of the Chinese domestic administration. It's not widely known that the Chinese customs in the late 19th century were run by Western officials with a British civil servant in charge of the Chinese customs. I mean, it's extraordinary, and by the way, he was a man of great personal integrity who ran China. But the fact is, he wasn't Chinese. So all of this was going on. Japan then joined in. That caused a major political, economic crisis in China. The dynasty eventually fell. There were wars, famines, the economy collapsed. There was a civil war. It looked for a time as if China might break down and as if its independence would be placed in jeopardy. And eventually, in the 1940s, it pulled through and it was reunited by the CCP. Now, many people have issues with the CCP, but it was the organization that in the end did reunite China and end this period of the century of humiliation. So that is the nightmare period for the Chinese. Just as the Russians look back to the 1990s and say this is the nightmare that we can't possibly ever return to. So that for the Chinese, it is a whole century from the 1840s, 1830s, 1840s to the 1940s that they do not want to ever revisit. And what it means specifically over Taiwan is that they will never cede Chinese territory again. I mean, they're never going to do what the imperial dynasty did, the Manchus did in the 19th century, give away Tianjin to the Germans, give away Hong Kong to the British, allow international settlements in Shanghai, allow extraterritorial rights to Westerners. They're never going to agree to give away any part of Chinese territory, or what they consider to be Chinese territory, because that would take them back exactly to the kind of things that used to happen during that century of humiliation. And all Chinese are united and saying never again.
Wolf Crew says China doesn't like losing face. It's within their DNA almost obsessively. This is scary.
No, it's true. And I mean, I don't like engaging in cultural... But I've explained it absolutely. But also, there is. I mean, there are cultural stereotypes. I've had many contacts with Chinese people. I've done business with them. And at the end of the day, beneath stereotypes, there are also sometimes truths, and it is absolutely true that the Chinese find it. I mean, face does matter. I mean, I know, for example, of Western business people who've said to me, when they go to China, and they're driven. They take a taxi and they give an address, and the taxi driver doesn't know where the address is. This is before you could find a way, but it would be too embarrassing for them to admit that, so they'd be driving around Beijing and Shanghai rather than admit that they didn't know where to take the passenger. So there is some truth to that. And of course, that's the culture you're dealing with. And you need to take that into account if you are governing, if you're conducting the foreign policy of a great power like the United States.
Pinyamamba, thank you for that super sticker. Today, Savory, thank you for that super sticker. Zeshan, thank you for that super sticker. Nick, thank you for that super sticker. Any Athletics, welcome to the Duran community. Elza says, what about the talks about nuclear weapons between the U.S. and Russia? Medvedev made his comment. Do we actually need it?
Well, the point is, again, this shows again the Biden administration, Joe himself, how completely detached from reality he's become. They talk about Putin as the sort of demon king. They wage a proxy war against Russia. And at the same time, they want nuclear deals with the Russians because, of course, they need them, because it's going to be more and more difficult probably to keep up with the arms race, given that we're now going to have an arms race against both the Russians and the Chinese simultaneously. But Medvedev's point, when you drill through to it, at the end of the day, is what he's saying is, can we trust the Americans? The answer is, we can't. Certainly, they can't trust these Americans. Now, if you have a completely different administration in Washington, one which is able to establish itself and put down roots and cleanse the stables, the State Department and all those places of the neocons, well, then maybe after a time you can talk with them and you can do deals. And, but at the moment, with the setup there is in Washington, the Russians don't trust them. If there's no trust, how can you agree arms limitation? It won't happen.
Denitsa Ivanova says, a comment I read somewhere in YT, we shouldn't ban fossil fuels. We should ban fossil politicians. Well said. Well said. Rubia,
brilliant.
Thank you for that.
Love it.
Thank you for that super chat, Rubia. Pell. Raul Pinto says, foreign ministry, Russia may break diplomatic ties with the U.S. if designated as terrorism sponsor. Thoughts?
Well, that's a strong statement. And I understand, by the way, that Blinken has already ruled it out.
He's ruled it out, yeah. For now, yeah. Yeah, Claudia, thank you for that super sticker. Commander Crossfire says the Ukraine army is morphing into more an organized terror outfit than a professional standing army, targeting civilians, banned munitions, other crimes.
I agree. That's all I got to say.
Elena says, guys, so many of us are watching. Don't forget to like and check your subscriptions. The least we can do to show our support to these great gentlemen. Yeah. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Elena.
Thank you very much. Yeah.
Thank you so much. Wando says, any takes regarding China's demographic challenges?
Oh, very huge. We must not underestimate China's own problems. They're going to have slow growth this year. They have a pandemic policy that I don't understand. They've got enormous demographic problems, which they've made for themselves, as far as I'm concerned. China has many, many problems. They're not 10 foot tall. And that's why I have to say this fear of China that there is in the US and this anxiety to sort of take them on in this fashion is, to my mind, unnecessary. The US has lots of things going for it, many things going for it. It's got its own huge problems, but it can deal with them. Perhaps China can, but there is no reason for the US at this moment in time to fear competition from China. And the demographic problems in China are very real.
Yeah, Andres says the U.S. can build everything it needs internally. China is very dependent on foreign trade. What keeps the Western world hooked on Chinese goods? Is there more to it than saving 50 cents on trinkets?
Well, there's lots of reasons. primary reason it's happened is because an awful lot of people in the West, businesses, corrupt politicians, bagmen, made lots of money out of it. It was profitable for them to relocate their factories to China, exploit cheap Chinese labor instead of expensive American labor. The American labor might have been more productive, better educated, more than that, but go to China, do it that way. And of course, on top of everything else, and this is where I think Putin spoke with great insight. But of course, he's not the only person to say this. If you're printing money all the time, because you want to avoid recessions, what you're going to do is you're going to weaken the productive side of your own economy. By the way, on your underlying analysis, I agree. I agree that the United States can be self-sufficient or largely self-sufficient as it was. Europe is different. China certainly is different. But the two countries that have the ability to be fully self-sufficient are the United States and, by the way, Russia. But the United States can certainly do that. But there's been accumulated problems because of all the things that we've been talking about. I was absolutely shocked, for example, to learn from Tom Longo that the American agricultural system, which is used to, bestride the world, it was the greatest agricultural system, is now in severe difficulties. And part of the reason is because young people haven't been becoming farmers, so that the average age of an American farmer is in the 60s.
Nadia says the U.S. has been the world's biggest bully. I am ashamed over being patriotic.
Well, you shouldn't be ashamed of being patriotic. You should be angry with the people in Washington who have been abusing the trust of the American people and have been acting in that kind of way and have been creating problems for the United States all around the world and ultimately problems for the American people themselves.
Stevens, thank you for joining the Duran community with the message FJB. Transport says the U.S. and its NATO members have become dictators. Thank you very much, Transport, for that. Winston, thank you for that super sticker. Mr. Wonderful says, I doubt the Taliban gave the U.S. permission to drone strike their country, but hey, Russia's the bad guy, right?
Quite true.
Well said. Bramwell, thank you for that super chat. Steven says, FJB and Hunter. Thank you very much for that. Mike V says, can you speak to the new BRICS, Venezuela, Russia, Iran, China, Syria, as a recent military formation against Western aggression?
Well, it is crystallizing. And why is it crystallizing? And why are we even talking about alliances to counter the United States? I mean, China had a very good economic relationship with the United States. Putin, Russia, had a very good relationship with Western Europe, or at least economic one. Putin wanted Russia to join NATO. He discussed it with Bill Clinton. The reason we have these alliances emerging, these countering American alliances, is because all of these countries feel that the US is putting them under constant pressure. And I come back to what I said at the outset of this program. Whatever else this crisis over Taiwan does, it's going to make the Chinese feel that they must tighten their relationships with the Russians even further.
Yeah. Liam, welcome to the Duran community. Che says, just a small thank you for all your work. Thank you, Che, for that. Steven says, American politics is a disgrace to politics, but they make good movies, huh?
Yeah, they make great movies. Sometimes
they used to make good movies.
They used to, actually, that's a good point. Yeah, that's a very good point. I mean, that, by the way, I mean, I think that's true. Anyway, let's move on.
Yeah. Donald, thank you for that super chat. Gordon, thank you for that super chat. Tabernacle says, don't get into a gunfight with the terminally ill. Thank you very much for that, Tabernacle. Agu says, the U.S. State Department is a Disneyland supervillain who thinks he is a Disney superhero.
Yes, brilliant. Very good.
Well said. Tish M says, sovereignty through de-dollarization, especially when lunatics like Pompeo say no matter the consequences, He helps to shape U.S. NATO policy. Can't be trusted. We lied. We cheated. That guy. Unipolar hegemony is their goal.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think Mike Pompeo is a disastrous figure, a disastrous political leader in the United States. It's a tragedy that Donald Trump ever made him Secretary of State and then previously CIA director. A person like that, with those kind of opinions, should never be allowed anywhere close to the levers of power. In a functioning political system, he never would have been. And I'm afraid it's a testament to the poor personnel picks of Donald Trump that he ever brought Pompeo into the administration.
David Greenwood, thank you for that super chat. Dr. Ron Paul says, follow the money. War is the only way to achieve the real great reset, though through de-dollarization. Until that happens, King Dollar will continue to crush all currencies.
Yeah, I can see that too. I mean, I can see that there is logic to that. But I mean, war may achieve a great reset, but it might be a great reset in which it's a great reset in the desert, because war has a capacity, an ability to kill people and destroy things. Is that what you want? Perhaps some people are prepared to take those risks, but that is incredibly dangerous.
Yeah, Tech Wong, thank you for that super sticker. Rinex says, regarding TikTok policy, you all agreed to have China to log into any device that's registered to TikTok from any device you're registered to. They don't need troops on the ground to blackmail you.
Oh, I mean, I don't. I mean, I don't know specifically that is true, but all I will say is I'm under no illusions. I want to say this: I'm not naive about China. I've been there. I've seen China. I was very impressed by a lot of things I saw in China, but there were a lot of things about China that I concerned me, and I would not want to see in my own country, even though our leaders seem to be intent to copy an awful lot of the worst things, at least worst things as far as I'm concerned, that the Chinese do. But I'm not naive about China, and no doubt they can monitor lots of things that go on, and no doubt they do have their friends in high places in the West as well. The point is not whether one likes China, one doesn't. The point is, do we want a war? And we are hurtling towards one. And it's a terribly, terrible thing. And it's been done in the most idiotic and incompetent way.
Yeah. Deborah Kroll says, Trump revisionism, Moab, North Korea, tore up IMF, flooded Ukraine with weapons, bombing Somalia, Yemen, Afghanistan, and Syria, ?
Yeah, I think this is true. But yet, nonetheless, the point about Trump is that in spite of everything, he was able to exercise restraint and keep things under some kind of control. Things never spiraled out of control when he was there. I remember there was that business with Iran, for example, when the Iranian general was killed and the Iranians responded by missile strikes, and Trump de-escalated. He was able to do that. These guys in Washington, the problem with them is they have no reverse gear. I've said this many times. They don't know when to stop. They don't really know how to reverse. Trump did, and that's a critical difference.
Yeah. The Art of Life says, thank you, Duran, for what you do. And Loke says Pompeo's nickname was Fidiot. Fat idiot. Thank you for that. And Loki says, and he prepares to run for president in 2024.
Oh, absolutely. I don't think he's got hope, by the way, but
Yeah,
anyway.
but,
I hope not.
Monica says, if the new West Rome is falling, are we now seeing the rise of the long-waited for the new Third Rome?
Well, yeah. What makes this so... I mean, the fall of Rome in the 5th century, you can say it was the result of enormous forces. There were obviously bad decisions made, but there was something ultimately almost inevitable about it. Let me repeat again, there is nothing inevitable about any crisis in the United States. This is entirely self-generated, which is what I find so tragic about this whole thing. Now, will there be a third Rome? Moscow, I presume you're referencing. I don't think so, actually. I don't think any power or combination of powers will exercise that same degree of power that the United States did. I mean, we overlook how powerful the United States has been. In the 1950s, its industrial position was much more dominant globally than China's is today.
Marcelo says NATO is equal to the USSR. It's following the same fate, same way.
Yes, I agree completely.
Tabernac says the mice have scattered in the midst of elephants. Well said. And Raphael says Nancy is not going to Taiwan. She is not crazy.
Mm.
We'll find out. We'll find out today.
We'll find out.
Likely.
I was going to say, is there a question mark? After that?
That's true. That's true, Raphael. Is that a question, Raphael?
Both parts of it, by the way.
Yeah. Ian says 2018, 2019 seems like paradise compared to today. The world seems to be like a pressure cooker ready to explode.
Yes, absolutely. And can I just say what has changed? What is the difference between then and now? There's only one thing that's really changed: the change in the administration. We always used to say this, that that 2020, the election in 2020 was really, really important. And it was. And we see how.
Yeah. Zuxi says, hello, gents. Is this the pride that comes before a fall moment?
Yes, it is. I mean, it is that there is a huge amount of elements to this in the kind of things that you see being done. No doubt about that.
Yeah, just a dude gaming. Thank you for that super chat. Steven says, I have full respect for you guys sticking with an open mind and not following the line and using common sense. Ura. Thank you for that, Stephen. Shurya says, Annalena Baerbock said Germany would support Taiwan militarily if China invades. Maybe China sanctions Germany. Yeah, Annalena's just off her rocker. I mean, she's a nutcase.
I mean, she's
yeah, she is.
She really is. I mean, she's terrible.
Yeah, beyond bad. She's beyond bad. She's worse than Blinken.
I agree. Yeah. I agree. I completely agree.
Jay says you two were 100% right about results of sanctions against Russia.
Thanks.
Thank you very much. Zachary says just wanted to thank the both of you for your hard work and dedication. Thank you for that, Zachary. Merkurth, welcome to the Duran community. Manfred, thank you for that super chat. Let's see here. Moromoto says the attempt to distract with Kosovo is most likely. Alexander's comparison to Spanish decline. U.S. makes perfect sense.
Thanks.
Thank you very much. Azaz says, you made your opinions clear about modern Russia, but what do you both think of Russia's experiment with communism? We've done complete programs about that.
We did complete programs on it. We one day we hope to go and do more. There's a lot to be said there. Follow our historical series. When we resume it, we will let everybody know. Unfortunately, the rush of events makes it very difficult. But I think rather than try and sum up what we're going to say in a proper program, I think we'll keep you all anticipated and you can see what we're going to say.
Yeah. Matlas X says, Alex, please don't plan any trips to Taipei or Tehran in the near future. You've stirred up enough trouble in Belgrade already. Oh come on. I didn't stir up this. Blinken. Blame Blinken. Talaton says, please, one of these days, talk to us about Crans Montana meeting and what the Norwegian Turkophile Espen Barth Eide did.
Is this? Yes.
The deal that never came through.
That's right.
Turkey.
That's right.
Yeah, Turkey, Cyprus, Greece. Yeah.
Right.
We'll see if we could do something there.
It might be an idea.
Jammy 99 says, can I add to your Elensky lexicon, Alex? Patsy. Let's face it, we know who they are and what they are.
Yeah.
Thank you very much for that. Rafi says, what do you think will happen? Will Chinese prevent her from visiting, or will this simply allow her to visit but not leave, or will they let her leave and then invade and occupy Taiwan?
I hope personally that they don't do any of those things. But as I said, I'm filled with foreboding. I think this is my own view that one way or the other, they're now going to prepare for war over Taiwan. I mean, they're going to be focused on that. Now, it may be that the calculations in Beijing are that, this is the moment of strike, especially, this comes back to what Tucker was saying, if they fear that there's any possibility of Taiwan acquiring nuclear weapons, then they will undoubtedly strike. But I don't think that's the plan now. We'll just have to wait and see.
All right, Alexander, you've got 5 minutes, and then you have to run off. But let's go through these questions and try to wrap it up. RDDR says, "Are we going to a nations-based international order?"
Yes, ultimately we are. Putin has talked about this a lot, by the way, but I think that is exactly what is going to happen. A nations-based international order underpinned by international law. I think that is the inevitable trajectory, provided we get through this extremely difficult transition.
David S., thank you for that super sticker. Command Unit says, "I'm surprised how fast mere credit card system is spreading now. Russia could now create a Rouge alternative economic system." Real quick, I agree, but Alexander, I'm noticing in Belgrade, a lot of union pay, a ton of union pay, which is interesting. Rafik says, "Love your discussion. Suggestions. Would you kindly consider inviting E. Michael Jones to discuss the current Ukraine and Taiwan? Thank you." We'll try to reach out. Absolutely. Yes. Jamila, welcome to the Duran community. Jason, welcome to the Duran community. Boredom Rex says, "Do you think they will be game to take on Iran? Iran's ultimate card is taking out oil production all across the Persian Gulf. End of civilization as we know it. The ultimate Trump card."
Well, I mean, it would be an extraordinarily stupid thing to do, to take on Iran at this time, at the time when we're in a worldwide energy crisis. But we're talking about the people who've decided that it's a good idea to send Nancy Pelosi to Taiwan in the middle of that same crisis. So how can we be sure? How can we be confident that they wouldn't do this crazy thing with Iran? I just hope that they don't, but I'm not confident that they won't. That's all I think I can say.
Not intimidated says, "Knowing what a drunk Pelosi is, she probably meant to say she wanted to tie one on, not Taiwan." Well said.
That's very good.
Not intimidated. Zachary says, "Seems like the Chinese learned from the British opium trade you were talking about, considering the current Chinese fentanyl trade. Karma, maybe."
Yeah.
Thank you for that super chat. Shady Lady, thank you for that super sticker. Let's see. Regina, thank you for that super sticker. David, welcome to the Duran community. Summer of 1970 says, "All the Western governments are FUBAR right now. You guys see any good outcomes for the West?"
At the moment, it's very difficult to be confident about this, but well, eventually, maybe, provided we get through this transition period, we're still old societies. We could perhaps find our way. I hope so.
David Greenwood, thank you for that super sticker. David Greenwood, thank you again for that super sticker. Pope Rackets says, "Easy to care about environment with mines in Africa. Green policy delusion has led here. Hard to have arms race without materials to build chips plants. No material."
Yeah, I think I get your point, actually. I think that's true. I mean, we have neglected the productive side. We have been very arrogant about the way we run things in the West, and it's catching up with us. It's caught up with us.
It has caught up with us. Lena A., thank you for that super sticker. Jason says, "Russia's in talks with Iran about a naval base in the Gulf."
Wow.
That would be big. Wow. 01 Luria says, "The US of A is the Bill Cosby of the world, in my opinion, in my humble opinion." Thank you very much for that. Just a dude. Thank you for that super sticker. David B says, "What is the future of the monarchy after Elizabeth?"
Huge question. It still has a lot of support in Britain. I think this is an important thing to say, but she is going to be an extraordinarily difficult act to follow. And especially with the United Kingdom itself now straining. If, the United Kingdom, Britain starts to break down because Scotland secedes and Northern Ireland goes, the diminished monarchy, I can see that there may be some people who might start to say, well, this is not really something we really can continue much further. Can I just say one thing about the monarchy in Britain, which is a point which perhaps people don't quite grasp? Britain, England, is an English-speaking country. What distinguishes Britain or England from the United States? Ultimately, the monarchy. If Britain becomes just another republic, there is a case I would have thought for saying that it might just be more logical for it to become part of that greater English speaking republic, which is the United States. Now, that's never spoken about. The British are very keen on their uniqueness, on their independence, on their separateness from the US. And I think that may be one reason why the British cling on to their monarchy so strongly.
All right. George Galloway interviewed Andrew Lowney about Prince Philip's alleged affair. Can the Duran talk about who she or they were allegedly, and is royalty irrecoverable under King Charles? Another monarchy question.
Who knows? I mean, I have heard there's been lots of rumors about Prince Philip having had affairs, particularly shortly after he married the Queen and in the 1950s. I can't really comment about that because I don't have any details about it. I think Charles will bumble along as king. I don't think he'd be anywhere near as popular as his mother. What comes after, I can't really say.
Yura Gabor says Orban is in Dallas and will deliver a speech on CPAC. Hopefully, the deep state won't pull a JFK on him. Oh, God.
Well, indeed, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. The final questions, Alexander, are from Rifat. Still no official announcement. That makes her kind of sneaking in. What is she, 17 years old?
Well, that's exactly a very good point. Thank you for making that point. I mean, how undignified for the president, for the Speaker of the House of Representatives, to sneak into a country like this. And that begs the question of whether she. That's another reason why I question whether she should be going at all.
Yeah, Divine Insurgent says military experts, retired General James Metzel has said that China overall is more powerful than Russia when it comes to military. I think Russia more powerful army and China larger navy.
I think that's true.
Yeah. Patrick England, thank you for that super chat. David, thank you for that super sticker. Let's see here. Roman says, hello, gents. Ready for the ghost of Taipei? Very, very well said. Elza says, gentlemen, how many hours a day do you not spend with geopolitics?
Oh, I'll try and count them. I can't tell you.
Yeah,
I think we're pretty much doing it all the time. I mean, I do have to spend a lot of time with my family, by the way, and that is that means that there are some times of the day when I'm not dealing with geopolitics, but with other things. But all the other times I spend on geopolitics, and I think the same is true of Alex.
Command Unit says, I am surprised how fast my Fastmere credit card system is spreading through Russia. Russia could now create a rogue alternative economic system. Let's see here. Divine Insurgent says getting a China Union Pay card, not in Russia yet.
No, it's true. But I mean, it'll come. And you'll get Mir cards in China as well.
Yeah. Maria, thank you for that. Maria, thank you for that super sticker. Filipino Traveler TV says, thank you, Alex and Alexander, for this interesting topic. Durant Superfan says, for as great as all the U.S. NATO faults are as the hegemony, I don't think people would really enjoy a Chinese-run global order. Better the devil you know.
I don't think there's going to be a Chinese global order because I don't think that China is in a position to provide it. This is a big topic, but as I said, China has its enormous strengths, but I think it cannot take the place of the United States. I don't think it even wants to, actually, but the last is, I think, a big topic for another day.
Some kind of headline says, LOL, leave monarchy lurid affairs to the press whose competency ends at celebrity scandals.
Yeah. Well,
thank you very much for that. And RDDR says, does the West just order regional divisions in a way that privileges its world order, then calls this a democratic arrangement?
Well, yes. I think it does. Yes.
Yeah. And finally, Rubia says, what's your opinion on the British bank taking Venezuela's gold? Also, what about gold quadrupling due to Pelosi, said Bloomberg Channel.
Well, on the first, I think it's disgraceful. I think it's illegal. I'm deeply dismayed by the decision of the British courts here. I'm unsurprised by it. I think it's a straightforward act of theft, actually. To put it no more straightforward. I mean, Britain has seized and stolen Venezuela's gold. By the way, there's precedent for this. The British did this before. I mean, we still have never found out what happened to the Tsar's gold, for example. I mean, which the money Nicholas put in an account in the Bank of England. There's never been an account for it. What became of it? But anyway, as to the rise in the price of gold, well, that's what always happens at a time of crisis. People go for gold because they see this as a safe haven.
All right. Summer of 1970, the final comment is, I've set my own rules to live by. The first one is, never believe anything the government says. George Carlin.
Good. Correct.
All right. I think I got everything, all the questions for the most part, Alexander. So we will leave it there.
We will have to because I have to go. But
go
thank you, everybody.
Lira's channel 2 for the live stream there. Thank you to our moderators. You know who you are. Thank you very much, Spartan Warrior Queen, Zarael, and GEC812, and Lady Cosmica, Alan Watson, Reckless Abandon. I think I got all of you that were moderating, I think. And thank you to everybody who sent us questions. Alexander is going to run now to another live stream, and we'll call it a day, Alexander.
We will indeed. Thank you very much, everybody.
Thank you very much. Alex and Alexander, have you all thought of moving to Russia with how things will be in Europe? Winter is coming. Jon Snow, and thank you, GEC812.
Well,
thank you, GEC812.
I'm very attached to my home in London, but
yes, if someone can get me a residence permit, I'm there. I'm there. All right, Alexander.
Okay.
Take care. Take care, everybody.
Right.